Hello, hello. This is a pop-up. So don't worry if you're late or you're watching this on the replay or you didn't know about it. It's not normally a streaming day, but I have a book that I couldn't get to enough detail in a wrap-up, and I said I will do a standalone book review. And it has come time to do the standalone book review. So pull up a chair, grab your mug, and let me tell you how interesting, informative, soothing this book was. And if you are doing Climathon in 2025, I would recommend this as like the capstone. I read it in November-ish, and I Want a Better Catastrophe by Andrew Boyd is a book written by an activist about the climate catastrophe. And it's not a first book. It's not something you pick up to learn about climate crisis. It's what you pick up when you've been in it and you realize what is going to happen and you're a little scared and you don't know who else is out there. And so you need a little help. The subtitle is Navigating the Climate Crisis with Grief, Hope, and Gallows Humor. And as I said before, I found this book because of a bookstore and a lovely person who helped kickstart that bookstore along with me. And their reward was choosing a book to sit on their shelves. So I saw this and I went, ooh, ooh, nice. So I picked it up and spent quite a bit of time reading it. It's got a couple fun features. So basically, as I said, it's an activist who's going through coping with where we are now, which is sort of like almost too late, right? He's made some flow charts. So like there's pull out maps and stuff, and they're like, diagrams with decision making things, which is kind of fun. There's some other graphs and maps and pictures of people and like just interesting stuff. He's basically talking to, I don't know, about eight leading climate thinkers. He goes to different interviews around the United States and interviews these folks, and they have like a range of viewpoints in terms of their thinking, whether they're doomsday or whether they're, positive or they're zen. So he talks to different ranges of opinions, and I found that very good perspective to give if you're someone who's reading this and highly anxious about what are we supposed to do now. So I thought I would go through my prepared notes for the wrap up because that will keep me contained. But there is a lot. So this will probably be like 45 minutes. We'll see. We're going to dive in. And the first page number is 23. And the headline is Why It's So Hard to Hope These Days. So, yeah, this is the piece that I highlighted. It's like a paragraph. It's not about being optimistic or pessimistic. It's not about having a pro-social or an anti-social attitude, because we already know we're in for a catastrophe, and while there's much we can do to slow it down or make it less terrible, there's nothing we can do to prevent it. So hope, at least the kind of hope we're familiar with from our daily lives and our historic social struggles, is not going to get us through the next 100+ years. We need something different. Maybe we need the kind of hope you call upon in an emergency, the hope you call upon when you're going in for cancer surgery or battling addiction or taken hostage or lost at sea. The hope we associate with grace, redemption, deliverance. The hope, not that things will get better, but that we will simply doggedly make it through to the other side. And I thought that was a really good way of describing the different kinds of hope. So if you're thinking that that word is insufficient for helping how you feel and helping the condition you find yourself in, confronting this big hyper object, there you go. There's the quote. The next one. Hi, Anita. If you're working and listening in, this might be a little distracting going from quote to quote. I have a couple that I'm going to share personal things with, but mostly it's just going to be like, wow, they phrase this really well. I hadn't thought about this, new information. On page 26, still under impossible news, we're talking about a quote from Joanna Macy, who's an eco-philosopher. That's what he calls her. A part of us falls silent. We play tricks on our soul. We slide into a strange double life, caught, says eco-philosopher Joanna Macy, between a sense of impending apocalypse and the fear of acknowledging it. She elaborates. In this caught place, our responses are blocked and confused. On one level, we maintain a more or less upbeat capacity to carry on as usual. And all the while, underneath, there is this inchoate knowledge that our world could go at any moment. Unless we find ways of acknowledging and integrating that anguished awareness, we repress it. And with that repression, we are drained of the energy we need for action. Whew! And did that just like describe some of the things that I have been fighting for so long? Yes. Yes, it did. So anguished awareness is that feeling of like bad things are happening and no one's acknowledging it, sense of impending apocalypse and the fear of acknowledging it. I just thought that was so good. And then we repress the awareness, so it drains us of the energy we need for action. So we get like hopeless and can't take those steps that we needed to and still need to. So that was really good. Page 28. So I tried to bring this up a couple days ago with my bookseller friend, Amanda, and I couldn't remember the guy's name, John Michael Greer. So I've read 2 books by him. Let's see what Andrew Boyd has to say. Let's see. It is the climate catastrophe is not a problem we can fix. It is rather something quite different. It's a predicament we must face. This distinction was brought home to me by collapse theorist, sci-fi novelist, and former archdruid of North America, John Michael Greer. Quote, a controlled creative transition to sustainability might have been possible, Greer argues, if the promising beginnings of the 1970s had been followed up in the 80s and 90s. But our politicians and CEOs failed us mightily in those decades and since. And so our predicament in the early 21st century includes the very high likelihood of an uncontrolled transition to sustainability through collapse. In other words, there was a window when there might have been a solution to the problem of climate change, those are in quotes, and the general unsustainability of our civilization. But that window was squandered, leaving us in a predicament. And so problem and predicament, and it's basically pointing to the fact that the terms we use are important and distinct and may help us see things differently if we use different terms. So predicament or catastrophe or emergency, he discusses various of these terms. Page 50. It's not all the tabs. I was a little selective, but it's most of the tabs and some of the turn downs. Okay, so 50, we need grieving rituals. Let's see. So this is during one of his interviews. It's an interview with Tim DeChristopher. And Andrew says, folks on the front lines in Pakistan, the South Pacific, New Orleans, they're already in the thick of the impacts. They've already got so much to mourn. Meanwhile, those of us removed because of our geography or relative privilege know it's coming. We know that everything we love is on the line, but we're cut off from one another and afraid to go there. There's a lot of alienation, a lot of disaster porn. We need grieving rituals so we can go through our despair together, so we can face the losses we know are coming. And here's where I say, we need grieving rituals so we can go through our despair together. That is why I'm hoping to attract people to talk out this kind of stuff. Starting January 19th, Sunday, first time is we're going to have our first TR session, Truth and Reconciliation session. It's one of the things that I'm doing as part of my Climathon co-hosting. And basically, it's providing space for people to come with their own agenda items and say, this is what climate change really makes me scared about, or this is what I'm really going to be sad that we lose as a civilization due to climate change. So January 19th, mark down that date, and my regular Sunday time, we should be launching. That should be fun. The next quote I have is 65. Oh, okay. So this is the first personal one. I was talking with a friend the other day and talking about how I have a weird relationship with authority and responsibility, both in opposition to it and when I have it myself. And this made me think a little bit about that. So it's in the 5 stages of climate grief section. As climate catastrophe rolls toward us, we're not just grieving our devastated world, we're also grieving something trickier, more hidden inside ourselves. Because what I suspect we may be most in denial of, and most angry at, bargaining with, depressed about, and yes, need to accept, is not so much the facts of climate change, nor even the reality of all that we stand to lose, but the burden it places on us. And immediately this made me think of, this is why I hate responsibility, because it's a burden. It doesn't feel like responsibility in our society is something that is respected. Like if you have responsibilities in a traditional society, it meant that you had earned a certain status and could be trusted with decision making. But I feel like today it's sort of inverted, and that a lot of responsibilities get shunted to folks who are overloaded already, or the decision making is divorced from the responsibility and the liability is divided up. And so the people who make the decisions are never actually facing up to, the impacts of those decisions. So that really chaps my hide. And that's what that brought up for me. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and why I have such a strong reaction against um mostly authority, but also just thinking about having responsibility, even though I feel like I'm a very responsible person. So there's sort of a conceptual thing swimming around in there that maybe I'll talk with my truth and reconciliation folks about in one of our sessions. There's going to be like one a month. So if you have an idea and want to come for February, March, April, let me know. 141. So we skip ahead here past the flow chart. This is really funny too. So if you're curious about what the tone is, like, it's a very funny, tongue-in-cheek, like dry irony, gallows humor, as he says on the cover. 141 is about giving something up. Oh, yeah. So in the same way that we talk about different types of hope, and that we need to be careful about the language, and there's a different service hope can render, this is one about facing up to what we need to do. And yeah. Where do I want to start? When folks say catastrophe is inevitable, oh, sorry, I should preface this with, it's an interview section with Gopal Dayaneni, who's another activist he interviewed. This is Gopal. When folks say catastrophe is inevitable, I think, well, yeah, but change is also inevitable. Transition is inevitable. Part of the catastrophism mentality is the idea that we're giving something up. In a just transition, what we'll be giving up is mass incarceration. What we'll be giving up is precarious housing. We can imagine a transition and actually organize toward one that both reduces our consumption of resources, redistributes them equitably, and creates greater democracy. Since we absolutely need to power down our civilization, why not embrace the peak? Let's celebrate the brownout. And if you don't know, a brownout is not like a blackout, because blackout is no power at all. Brownout is when you choose to turn it off, and you are doing that to conserve. There is a future in which we shut off non-essential power from, say, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. So you have to go outside and play with your kids, or be with your neighbors, or whatever. And I was like, there we go, reframe it. So I studied conflict negotiation in a class in college, way back in college. And what really stuck with me when I was studying different peace negotiations in history was Johann Galtung's institute, because he actually came and talked at Santa Clara when I was there, and he had this metaphor for peace negotiations that was about asking for what people really want, not for like the thing that they're fighting over. So if you're fighting over an orange and you're not willing to give an inch until you sit down and, like, separately you ask the two parties, why do you want the orange? One wants the orange for the juice from the inside, and one wants the orange for the zest on the outside. Well, you're not in conflict, but until you actually get at what you need and talk things out, you're going to fight. And so when we look at things that are intractable conflicts and, like blackouts and just essential power being lost and people's health devices being turned off, like, no, we could choose to turn a non-essential power off at different times. Yes, it's limiting freedom, but like freedom to doom scroll, freedom to, microwave a meal, like get together with your neighbors. There are other choices. And I feel like reorienting ourselves towards we can promote things we want rather than always feel like we're depriving ourselves is a great way to reframe. So I like that idea a lot. And I now want to look up Gopal Dayaneni and see if he's got other stuff out that I should look up. I think he's a Bay Area activist. 144. And this is another one that was a little personal. So this is still with the interview with Gopal. And I'll just say, hi, Andy. Hi. Hi, Leslie. Hello. I'm doing my standalone book review that I didn't do in December because it was too long. And this one gets its own because I have so many things to say about it. So 144 is about strategy. And it's Gopal again. Let's see. If all we do is fight against what we don't want, we learn to love the fight. And I know people who do. But we'll have nothing left for our positive vision but longing. And longing is not good enough. That hit me. Instead, you must directly apply your labor to meeting your needs in such a way that you become invested in that solution, in the very little sense that you depend on it, so that when the powers that be threaten it, you're prepared to defend it. So it goes on, talks about community stuff. And I feel like I am probably guilty of this, like thinking that I am in the fight because I have the longing for justice. Like, true, there are people who don't have that longing. There are people who don't know about the injustice. So I'm like 3 steps in, but I am not in the room in the fight because I'm not taking action in some of those cases. So that's a good thing to hear for me. And yeah, I got a tab. So yeah. 147. The justice. So this is really important for social justice folks and those wondering how climate change and social justice overlap or coincide or grate against each other. So this is still with the interview with Gopal. He's a really good interviewer. So Gopal says, at one point in the workshops, climate workshops he gives, we make the case that the transatlantic slave trade was an ecological catastrophe. And we tell people, sit with that for a second and understand that it was not fossil fuels that enabled American capitalism and the empire. It was enslavement. Sit with it, understand it, feel it. Understand that enslavement is, in fact, deeply connected to the fact that there are now islands of trash in the ocean, that whole countries are disappearing under the Pacific, that entire cultures are under assault, and species are being wiped off the planet at a catastrophic rate. For all of us, the histories of colonization, enslavement, migrations, globalization that run through our families and stories are what brought us to the brink of ecological collapse. Do not separate what is happening from your own history and your own ancestry and your own experience, and grieve it so that you can step into the power that it takes to fight back and build something different and lead the transition. And I thought that was really powerful too, because a lot of times the straw man argument is like some of the same populations are environmentalists as are social justice warriors, or whatever you want to call them. And so the people who are in power promoting both of those injustices will say, well, you can't have both. Which are you going to choose? And in fact, this reframes it as like they are inextricably inclined. The power differential is what created the catastrophe. And so they need to be solved at the same time. And so that's why I like his envisioning a just transition thinking of positive ways to work towards something while we're powering down demand. And I'm just like, yes, yes, more of that. I thought that was really powerful. 167. I think I already talked about this one. Did I? The burden? Oh, okay. So this is part 2 of authority and the burden. 167, how to be white at the end of the world. So we're getting into some of the racism and more social justice stuff. So Andrew Boyd is talking about the first time he was in an actual environmental protest, like in the water, to shut down a nuclear weapons laboratory in Livermore. And yeah, we stopped business as usual at the laboratory for just one morning, but this tiny act of defiance changed me forever. To do what was right, regardless of fear or the law, was cathartic and empowering, releasing me from a lifelong trance of goody two shoes, no questions asked, deference to expertise and authority. Does that sound like anyone you know? Oh, man. So, again, so this relates to, like, the longing to take action as well as the burden of responsibility, I feel like, because I see myself in this sentence and in Andrew's experience of never having put myself on the line, I feel like, for those things and broken through to the other side. He says it's cathartic because once you stand up to something that you believe is important enough and important enough to disrupt, you know, your brain changes, for lack of a metaphor, since I don't seem to have one right now. And uh maybe I need some sort of tripwire like that, because I go through thinking and thinking and thinking about things and talking and talking and talking and processing, and like the actions that I take are so small that I feel like something that breaks through would be good, but it's very scary. So if you have comments on that or advice, like, please weigh in. I thought that was a good one for like personal responsibility towards the topic. 190. 190. Okay. 190 is during another interview. This one with Joanna Macy, the another eco philosopher, I think. And I also shared this with a friend the other day. Joanna says, it's hard to invite people into more honesty than they're accustomed to. More honesty than our culture generally tolerates. In America, there's this very strong need to be hopeful and comfortable. You get the message early on that if you wanted to get ahead, you don't talk about the really dark stuff. If you want to have friends, don't tell them how bleak it is. But inviting people into their honesty can be very liberating. And letting people know they're not alone in all this can be very empowering. And again, that is what I am hoping for. That is what I am trying to make space for and hold space for at these truth and reconciliation sessions once a month that will start on January 19th. Do I have that right? Yes, Sunday, January 19th. I had the wrong calendar up earlier. I recycle calendars when I get the same year, and this one is from 2020, and it's Sarah Scribbles, who's one of my favorite cartoonists, but I had the wrong one up, and now it's on the right day. So Sunday, January 19th is my first Truth and Reconciliation session, so I'm pretty excited. But yeah, honesty, more honesty than our culture generally tolerates. And I was trying to recall this quote yesterday, and I came up with polite and positive, which sort of gets at the issue, because I know positivity has been written about in terms of um, when people are in healthcare struggles and they say be positive. And someone wrote, I don't remember who, a book about like shut up about the being positive when you have cancer. Like that's not the way. Like, let me process this, you know. But hopeful and comfortable. And I think this means a different kind of, here we go, hope than I talked about from that quote at the beginning. Hope that you just power through no matter what. This is the hope that is, maybe it'll turn out okay. You're like, no, you need to be realistically hopeful. So that's a different thing. And comfortable. Oh, yeah, we've got some great quotes about people being comfortable. So I'm sure you're familiar with those. But yeah, this is what makes confrontation and conversation and calling people out on any number of issues really difficult for Americans, I think. Um, and for me, not wanting to disturb people who are comfortable. One, because I don't know what reaction it will provoke, and I don't know if that, threatens my safety in certain situations. And for another, like, well, I guess that's the main one. We'll just stick with that. Yeah. 196. All right, so this is a corner that got turned down. This is still the interview with Joanna Macy, and this is getting at the point that there's people who can be persuaded and there's people who can't. And, if you want to talk about what happened in the election and where your time is best spent on the campaign trail, for example, this has an analogy. She says, at this point, with all that's going on, if somebody isn't concerned, I'm not going to bother with them. There are enough people who are concerned. We don't need to have 100% of people on board. It'd just be so tedious to try to convince someone who's become such an escape artist to themselves, who's put a bag over her or his head. I love that image. And yes, there's a lot of them. But why should I decide I'm their moral rescuer? I'd much rather find people, and there are so many people, who are still alive enough to care. And this is the flag. If you're on TikTok and you know about the red flag guy and the green flags he now does too, like, this is my green flag. There are still so many people who are alive enough to care. So focus your energy on them. We were talking with my friend a little bit about the difference between persuading people who are very hard to persuade or like their heads in the sand. And I just sort of said, then they don't get to be in my fun commune. They don't get to survive the apocalypse. Like, if they're not going to listen, if we're not going to have a conversation, if they're not going to seed scientific fact, like, why am I spending my energy, my little spark, my soul craft, my breath talking with those kinds of people? Convince me. But yeah, I'm so much an escape artist to themselves. That's why I think it's really important. I've done this for, since college, to read self-help books, to journal, to go to therapy, to do all these things that help you discover yourself and like pick away at how you work and why you're powered the way you are, and know those things so that you're not an escape artist to yourself. I thought that was great. 241. It's another corner turned down, maybe. I ran out of sticky notes. No. Yes. Okay. So 241 is in this section called What is Still Worth Doing. So this is addressing the gray area, right? Of like, we have to mitigate, we have to adapt, and we also have to mourn, because like we're never going to have this level of civilization again. We're headed toward collapse. And his metaphor is like, we're going down some rapids. We can, get a couple oars and stick them on the rocks while we're going down in our kayak to make it not as bad, but it's still going to be pretty bad, And this section is titled, Why the fuck am I recycling? And I'm sure some of you who are watching this have had that thought. So here's what I really identified with, and this really resonated with me. So it's a little religious resonance here. Every returnable bottle I take back to the grocery store, every soup can I rinse out and put in the recycling bin, is a secular offering, a sacred vote of confidence in the future. A moral act that aligns my habits with my values and keeps me on a principled path. It's an act that maybe matters less for its direct material impact than for the work it does upon me, the recycler. And then he goes on, but what really happens up the chain after we ritually rinse off our filmy milk jugs and fold our newspapers and place them in the bin and carry our offerings Always on Friday morning, the mandated day of deliverance, to the curb to meet their remaker. Forgive me, earth, for I have sinned, we whisper into our recycling box confessionals. So he's being funny here with the religion ritual thing. But I really like that he's justifying these actions because they're the right thing to do. And even if it's playing music on, or, playing music on the Titanic as it goes down, that aligns with your values and keeps you on a principled path. You're creating joy in the world, you're sharing community, and you're not harming others. You're trying to do what little you can in your own way. And so I really like that. I think there are more ways to do this besides recycling, obviously. And I've definitely heard from other activists who talk about recycling being like the poster child for climate change and environmental activism. And like, it's such a tiny thing. You have personal activism, you have industrial action. It's like, come on, they're what we're doing, what they're doing, like, it's not going to make a dent. But this still works for that, outside of all the climate catastrophe, world ending stuff, human civilization ending stuff, I should say. So I just really like that. 296. We've got 293, 296. All right. So his last interview is with the famous Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, who needs no introductions. She's an Indigenous scientist who also has written 3 books now. And so he interviews her. And the one point I wanted to take away from that interview was something that to help urban folks like me. Robin says, let's remember, because she's talking about the honorable harvest, take only what you need, take only 10%, make sure that there's still more to flourish. Let's remember, people in urban settings aren't going to have traditional systems of reciprocity. Part of the problem of referring to the wisdom of reciprocity as traditional knowledge is that it makes it seem like the only way we can go is backwards. Kind of like blackouts and depriving yourself, giving something up. Back to what we used to do. This is not the case. Our people, she's talking about the Haudenosaunee, her tribe, our people survived because they adapted to contemporary circumstances. Humanity, too, must adapt. The core teaching is reciprocity. We just need to figure out how to make it work at scale in our world now. And I thought that was a really valuable point to bring together the traditional straw man argument with going backwards straw man argument. And she's great. So like, that's the part I wanted to pull out of her interview. And, that came up in the discussion with my friend, the whole going backwards thing, and how people who lived in communes inevitably break down. So, their experiments fail. People go back to cities. The trend continues on. And so his opinion was that it hadn't worked. And I would say, well, number one, we don't have to consider it going backwards. We're taking some things from the past and embracing reciprocity, as Dr. Kimmerer says. And that can be for our good. It's not giving something up. It can be for intentional goals that we have, like spending more time in community and having less food waste and spending less gasoline traveling farther afield for groceries, something like that. So I really like that. So reciprocity is the word. Yeah. This is definitely hitting all the right beats. I'm definitely going to listen again and a rewatch. Listen again. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Heyo. Hey, Ben. We're doing a standalone single big book review because I didn't have enough space in December. So I'm going into depth and I'm almost finished here. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, and then I've got one more quote to share, which is 309. And this is a funny one. So we'll end with some humor here. This is in the section called Experiments on the Verge. And again, like he does his own graphics. So like you can appreciate these That's what I was talking about, the kayak going down the rapids. It's useful. It's like talking in metaphors, which is how I understand things. 309 is about the iPhone. Okay, so thinking about backwards, giving things up. So I know what you're thinking. The numbers are heading towards 0 when we talks about downgrading your phone. And eventually you're going to lose or break your last iPhone 1 and there will be nothing to upgrade to. Then what? Maybe you'll go outside and play or stay inside and meditate or learn to paint. And who knows, it might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Now, not all of us are going to be able to pull this off. Most of us are not going to be happy that our iPhone upgrades are going backwards. But here's the thing, you don't have to be happy about it. All you have to do is find a way to not be so unhappy about it that you start voting iPhone deniers into office, or burn your neighbor's house down looking for an extra iPhone 6, or blame the Jews for the iPhone problem. He's using iPhone as just like the one metaphor, right? Or round up all those iPhone stealing Mexicans in camps. What does victory look like in an era of civilizational unraveling? Easy. Finding within us just enough humanity to not do any of those things because of an iPhone. Think we can do that? I don't know. So, yeah, it's just, he's so good at like picking apart bad arguments, bad faith things. And he's wrestled with this for a long time, obviously. So me going through it after reading a lot of nonfiction, studying it in grad school about the actual science and policy, seeing all the inaction, and really, I was ready for this book. And so this is why I suggest, if you are participating in Climathon, read all your other books first. Let this be your capstone if this appeals to you, because the grieving and the gallows humor are what you need after you've read all the other stuff about disappearing species and rising oceans and collapsing civilizations and the struggle, you know. So that is my advice and my highly, highly recommended book review of I Want a Better Catastrophe by Andrew Boyd. That's what I got for you today. Tune in Sunday, January 19th for the first Truth and Reconciliation session with Melissa Ike and Victoria from Victoria Talks Writing, right stuff. I think I got it wrong last time. And Saturday, so in a few days, I'm going to have my launch party. So I launched the book. I went home for the holidays. I'm back in Portland. And if you haven't been to Bold Coffee and Books, you should definitely come down. They are my newest indie bookstore within walking distance in my neighborhood, and it's fantastic. It features and highlights marginalized voices. The coffee's good, they tell me, and I have a signature drink for my launch party. So it's 7 p.m. Saturday night, and if you're in the area, I'd love to see you there if you're in Portland to celebrate Book 7, another historical fiction that talks about the strength of the individual against the big bad corporation, or at least that's one reading of it. So thank you for all who were able to drop in. This is just a pop-up book review, and I hope it convinces some of you guys to pick up the book and participate in Climathon. There's 12 prompts, but you only need to read one climate book to participate. So I'd love to be tagged if any of you decide to read this and grapple with the same topic. So I live for this type of discussion. That is all for today. Thank you for watching. Take care and happy reading, everyone. Hopeful reading.